Welcome to this special service. Our congregation has been so fortunate to be able to continue worship services in a virtual world. I have so appreciated the willingness of each to share. Thank you to all who have welcomed us into your homes. It has been fun getting to know you better. I enjoyed practicing the body prayer with the Brown family. I admired Kathy's talent as she painted the road to Emmaus in her art studio. I appreciated how beautifully organized Garland's bookcase was. I loved when Hannah's dog Ricky made a cameo appearance during her Disciples Generous response, and when the Johnson boys opened their eyes to peek during the closing prayer. And I was deeply moved when Gretchen showed us the light green chair that she has prayed in for 48 years. I imagine that she has sat in that chair and prayed often for her Colonial Hills family. As I stand here now in the sanctuary, I imagine each of you here. I am deeply aware that our services and gatherings may look very different next year, and I am saddened that there will be 4 empty chairs. I am disappointed that we cannot gather together tonight in person, but at the same time, I realize we are together in spirit. I believe that God is greater than time and space, and has gone ahead to prepare the way and bless our time together. I would like to thank each person who has so generously shared their stories, gifts, and talents for our time together tonight. This evening, we will be creating sacred space, honoring our grief, kindling hope, restoring wholeness, and seeking new horizons. You may notice that each of these is an ing word, for these are soul action words. They are meant to be practiced. Over the years, I have studied and read much about compassion. One author, Carla McLaren, is a well-known social scientist and researcher who studies empathy. She states, emotions are celebrated and repressed, analyzed and medicated, adored and ignored, but rarely, if ever, are they honored. Tonight, join us as we pause to recognize and honor the many emotions that we have experienced over the past several months. Many have faced physical and mental health challenges, financial pressures, job stressors, strained relationships, grief, and loss. We see the world in injustice, polarization, and separation, and long for love and healing. May we open our hearts to healing. May we listen for God's gentle whisper, and may we feel the warm embrace of love.
Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya, kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya, kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya, oh Lord, kumbaya. Someone's praying, Lord, kumbaya. Someone's praying, Lord, kumbaya. Someone's praying, Lord, kumbaya. Oh Lord, kumbaya. Someone's singing, Lord, kumbaya. Someone's singing, Lord, kumbaya. Someone's singing, Lord, kumbaya. Oh Lord, kumbaya. Come by here, my Lord, kumbaya. Come by here, my Lord, kumbaya. Come by here, my Lord, kumbaya. Oh Lord, kumbaya.
Rabbi Rami Shapiro, commonly called Rabbi Rami, is an award-winning author of over 36 books on religion and spirituality. I would like to read to you his unique statement pertaining to healing. There are moments when wellness escapes us, moments when pain and suffering are not dim possibilities, but all too agonizing realities. At such moments, we must open ourselves to healing. Much we can do for ourselves, but what we can do, we must do. Healing, no less than illness, is participatory. But even when we do all that we can do, there is often still much left to be done. And so when we turn as well to our healers, seeking their skill to aid in our struggle for wellness, but even when they do all they can do, there is often still much left to be done. And so we turn to life, to the vast power of being that animates the universe as the ocean animates the wave, seeking to let go of that which blocks our healing. May those whose lives are gripped in the palm of suffering open even now to the wonder of life. May they let go of the hurt and meet the true self beyond pain, the uncarved block that is our joyous unity with holiness. May they discover through pain and torment the strength to live with grace and humor. May they discover through doubt and anguish the strength to live with dignity and holiness. May they discover through suffering and fear the strength to move toward healing. Dum 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 dum.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not, 'cause the dreams bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Close to the ones here today, close to the ones that we lost on the way, 'cause the dreams bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back you. There's a time that I remember when I did not know no pain, when I believed in forever and everything would stay the same. Now my heart feel like December when somebody say your name, 'cause I can't reach out to call you, but I know I will one day, yeah.
Everybody hurts sometimes, everybody hurts someday, yeah. But everything will be alright. Go as your voice will say, hey.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not, 'cause the dreams bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Close to the ones here today, close to the ones that we lost on the way, 'cause the dreams bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back you. Memories bring back you. There's a time that I remember when I never felt so lost, when I felt that all the hatred was too powerful to stop. Now my heart feels like an ember, and it's lighting up the dark. I'll carry these torches for you, let you know I'll never drop.
gonna be alright. Go and raise your voice and say, hey.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. 'Cause the dreams bring back all those memories of everything we've been through. Close to the ones here today. Close to the ones that we lost on the way. 'Cause the dreams bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back you. Do 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 do. Memories bring back you. Do 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 do. Memories bring back you. Do 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 do. Memories bring back you. Here's to the one. Cheers. Memories bring back you. Here's to the one. Memories bring back you. Memories bring back you.
When I think of Steve Peck, I think gentle giant. A giant not only in the fact that he stood 6'4" and I always had to look up to him unless he was sitting down, but also in his character. He just always seemed larger than life. His gentleness, on the other hand, was most evident when he tenderly held his baby grandsons, Finn and James. Jack and I met Steve and Pam for the first time on a Colonial Hills Kids Club trip to Nauvoo. I remember seeing this beautiful couple enter the breakfast spot, and then we were introduced to the Pecks. We sat at the little cafe eating breakfast, and I remember finding out that Steve was a teacher and coach at Raytown South, and Pam was a Spanish interpreter at Truman High School. Their daughter Sarah was in the middle school, and they were transferring to Colonial Hills so she could be involved with the kids' activities. Steve would affectionately call Sarah Leroy, so for a while I wondered if her middle name was Leroy. We learned quickly that Steve could lead into dad jokes or a funny story at the drop of a hat. Besides being a great storyteller, Steve was the ultimate coach and teacher to others besides his school students. Our son Zane gives Steve credit for helping him to make the middle school basketball team by giving him a few pointers in the driveway. One of Jack's favorite moments with Steve was at a Royals-Giants game when he showed him the app that he uses to evaluate runners. With the app, you can shoot a video clip and then move it back and forth with stop action to precisely analyze movement. Jack learned more from Steve about pitching mechanics that day than he ever thought was possible. Steve had so much knowledge, but the truly amazing thing was how well he could share that knowledge even with someone that wasn't exactly baseball savvy. We enjoyed many games with the Pecks, rooting for the Giants, and us rooting for the Royals. Pam and Steve supported and were Sarah's biggest fans throughout her volleyball career. Steve was so proud of her. Steve was also on the ready anytime anyone wanted to go fishing or play golf. Our family traveled by car, caravanning with the Pecks to Florida to visit their daughter Laura the summer after Sarah and Griff graduated from high school. Steve's car stories were priceless and kept us laughing for hours. Steve's family were top priority. When his son Brad got married, Steve was beaming. When Laura graduated medical school, he was so proud. Our friendship continued when Jack and I would watch Downton Abbey at their house on Sunday nights. I'm pretty sure that Jack and Steve were humoring Pam and I with our devotion to Downton Abbey, but it continued through the whole series of Outlander. We also played sequence and shared many dinners at their house. We attended Colonial Hills Progressive dinners together. Not many people even knew that Steve had one kidney removed from cancer 11 years ago. He was not one to complain. He was one of the good ones, quiet in faith, but public in moral standing. We will always love Steve and treasure our time together.
We've been asked to speak about our dear friend, Chuck Hakes. No doubt Chuck would get a kick out of the fact that I haven't been this dressed up since last March, and I wouldn't do it for just anybody, but for Chuck, yeah, I'd do it. Typically, when our choir starts preparing for Christmas or Easter, we don't have a lot of people show up for the first practice. But I could always count on looking over toward the tenor section and seeing Chuck ready and eager to sing. He loved singing in choirs. He loved music, and he loved being with people, especially with his church community. He was at home with guitar playing at a bluegrass festival or as a mass choir and orchestra performing Handel's Messiah. Being faithful was just a way of life for him. For several years, Chuck rode along with me in the harvester's van every Wednesday, helping deliver groceries to all kinds of places neither of us had ever been before, to churches, senior citizen high-rises, and community centers in Kansas City's urban core, to small towns 3 counties away. And while we'd always look forward to stopping mid-morning for coffee and donuts, Chuck did appreciate a good donut, as well as a whole range of other delicious foods. In particular, a couple dozen pies every year at the Hakes Extended Family Thanksgiving. It was our conversations on those Wednesdays that I'll cherish most of all. Certainly, Chuck loved his family. Marilyn, his kids and grandkids, and everyone in his family clan, and a number of folks, young and old, he treated just like family. Deep in his core, Chuck loved God, this church, and the opportunity and privilege to serve in its priesthood. We shared experiences of serving as pastor and testimonies of how God's Spirit had sustained and blessed us, as well as others close to us. Faith was not just an add-on or secondary matter for Chuck. It was right there in his core, in his heart and his soul. I'm a better person for having Chuck Hakes as my friend, and I know I'm not the only one by far who can say that.
What a pleasure it has been to have shared the years of friendship we have had with Chuck and Marilyn. We've been blessed, as so many of you can also say. If I take a snapshot look back at the times we've spent together, I think of worship, music, visiting, eating in many venues, and in the last few years, going to concerts together, to the Fountain City Brass Band biannual concerts and the UMKC annual Christmas concert held in a huge church in Kansas City with hundreds of people in attendance. Anytime the 4 of us would go out and Rich drove the car, Chuck would open the door for me if he could make it to the car first, because Chuck was a gracious man. That's what he was taught to do. Our evenings out would often include going out for dinner, and that meant spirited discussions. It included what was important to us: our church experiences, our families, our histories. Yes, Chuck and I were both raised in Michigan, and what was going on in current day-to-day life. We kept up with travel tales of which couple was going to Denver and which couple was coming back. One day we were both on I-70 and Marilyn and I were texting back and forth of road conditions and a quick ice storm that had left a lot of vehicles stranded. A few months ago at a worship service, Chuck's testimony was shared by Marilyn. That testimony went to the root of who Chuck was. It was dictated passionately, where Chuck honored the parents who raised him. The godly values they instilled in his introduction to the then RLDS Church. He talked of church experiences over his lifetime he was privileged to have, giving God all the glory. His life was not an easy life. Not a lot of people experience the death of a son early in life, nor a house fire where one loses everything. And yet Chuck could still have that ability to give thanks to God for all. His life included and was enriched by God, church, and family. They were his roots, and you knew it. In closing, there was a time in every UMKC Christmas concert where all the concert attendees stood. With the joint concert choirs of the university, who standing above us in the balcony, we would sing with a huge pipe organ and brass instruments playing, "Joy to the world, the Lord has come." That song would herald in the Christmas season in a way that supersedes any way humanly possible. If you could sing that song with the hundreds of people with a dry eye, you are a stronger person than I. Chuck, Marilyn, Rich, and I have never experienced a choir like that before. I put that last sentence in the present tense because in this service of remembrance, our friendships are still in the present tense.
This candle is being lit in loving memory of Jim Crum. This is a picture of Jim and his dog Max. They were two of a kind. They were just partners with each other all the time. You didn't hardly ever see Jim without Max. And so, I hope you can see it okay. We met Jim and Jeannie in 1967 when we were in Independence attending the School of the Restoration in preparation for Alec and Jim to serve as full-time ministers for the church. So if you do the math, between 1967 and 2020, that's 53 years that we were able to share as friends with Jim and Jeannie. You know, I believe with all my heart that friends are a gift from God, and we were certainly blessed with the gift of Jim and Jeannie. You know, Jim had a bit of a sense of humor. He was always trying to do things to make people laugh, but it was a subtle humor, and sometimes you weren't quite sure whether he was joking or whether he was serious until he would get his famous smirk on his face. And then we knew that he was making a big joke of something. But I always loved Jim's sense of humor. So I wanted to share with you tonight a couple of things that I remember with Jim that were kind of humorous and kind of made us laugh together. You know, Jim loved to have breakfast, no matter what time of the day it was. He was always up for breakfast. Well, Jim and Jeannie and Alec and I were able to go out to several restaurants together. And one of the ones that we chose to go to was the Corner Cafe. And we would go there several times, and Jim always wanted to order breakfast. And so he would say to the waitress, "I want biscuits and gravy." And she would say, "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't serve biscuits and gravy at night." And Jim would look at her and he'd say, "You don't serve biscuits and gravy? Not at night, sir. We don't serve them, sorry." So Jim ordered some other kind of breakfast. So the next time we went, he said to the waitress, I want biscuits and gravy. And the waitress said, I'm sorry, sir, we don't serve biscuits and gravy at night. Every time we went there, Jim would order biscuits and gravy just to get a reaction out of the waitresses. And then one time, when Jim turned 40, very early in the morning, Alec and I went over, and I had made a huge sign and put it on his garage door long before Jim was up. And it said, Jim is 40 today. Well, when Jim got up, he heard these cars kept tooting their horns as they would go by his house. And Jim couldn't figure out what in the world are these cars tooting their horns at. Finally, he thought, I better go outside and see what's going on. So he went outside and he looked on his garage and he saw that huge sign saying that he was 40 today. Well, he took it all in good humor, and I'm so thankful for that. But he knew immediately who had put that sign up there. So that's the kind of funny relationship that we had together. When we lived in Canada together in Guelph, which was the Canadian headquarters, Jim was the Bishop of Canada, and Alec was the regional administrator. So we got to share many years together in Canada with Jim and Jeannie. Jim and Alec traveled quite a bit, so they weren't always home very much. But when they were, we loved to go bowling. We would bowl as often as we could, and we just loved doing it together. So this one time we went bowling, and it was Alec's turn to bowl. So he took his ball, and he put it behind him ready to throw the ball. Well, his thumb got stuck in the ball, and the ball went straight up in the air and down crash onto the alley. Well, Jim started to laugh hysterically, and Jeannie and I just looked at each other, and we didn't know whether to run or whether to just ignore them and not even let the people know that we knew them. But needless to say, we never went back to that bowling alley again. So it's just one of those things that it's hard to put together all of our friendship in 53 years. In the last few years when we moved to Blue Springs, Jim was the one that encouraged us to come to Colonial Hills. That has been one of the best things that we have ever done, and we have shared together in the Colonial Hills congregation with Jim and Jeannie. Unfortunately, when we come back and we are able to gather in the church together again, Jim's chair will be empty. And that will just be difficult for us to deal with because he was such a good friend. We will miss him terribly, but we're so thankful, and we feel God blessed us for so many years with Jim and Jeannie as our friends. And we hope that our friendship will still continue with Jean and the family because they still mean so much to us. And Jim has been a part of our lives for so long that our friendship will be forever. We went by to see him the day that he turned 86, and we knew very well that that was the last time that we would see him on earth. But we never said goodbye to Jim because we will see him again. And I look forward to that day that we will be with him once again and pick up our friendship once more. So Alec is going to share with you now some things about Jim.
First of all, I'm wearing a tie. And obviously for this occasion, a tie is not necessary, but I'm doing it in recognition of Jim. Jim, when it came to a formal worship service of any kind, he always came with his best clothes on. Always wore a tie. Not because he was somehow wanting to be conspicuous with the tie, but he felt like he needed to always have his best attire on as he was going to worship God. So I'm wearing a tie in memory of Jim. Now, it's not a very serious tie that I'm wearing right now. It's a tie that has a lot of Looney Tune characters on it. Sylvester and Bugs Bunny and Pepe Le Pew and the Roadrunner are on my tie. So Jim probably is kind of chuckling at this point and also just kind of shaking his head, I'm sure. I want to talk just briefly about my time with Jim, primarily in the Ontario region, where we were assigned together for a number of years. As Sharon has already indicated, he was the Bishop of Canada and also the regional bishop, and I was the regional administrator of the Ontario region. And we shared together in many different ways. We traveled throughout the region, which was quite large geographically. Often we would travel in wintertime and through snowstorms and icy roads in order to achieve our objectives and where we were going at that point. I always found Jim to be a good friend, and a great colleague, and a great minister, and I appreciated the opportunity to be with him. We also would travel together as we would come to Independence for appointee gatherings, and we would drive together, and once again, that gave a great opportunity to share in some very significant ways. When we came, by the way, to Independence during those years, we would stay at Ron and Marion Manuel's place, Evan Manuel's parents, and that's where we would stay together in that residence. I will miss Jim in so many different ways. During our time here in Blue Springs in recent years, the opportunity to have Sunday lunch with the Crum family was always something that Sharon and I always looked forward to, and we miss those already. Jim and I would quite often go out for lunch together to Dixon's Chili. That was one of his favorite restaurants, and we would share there again. I found, as I said, Jim to be uplifting in his friendship, humorous, but yet very serious in his ministry, and I've appreciated that over the years. In the Ontario region, he and I were responsible for conducting the very first regional conference for the Ontario region when the church authorized conferences for the region. And that was a lot of hard work. And he and I shared together in that significant moment in the life of the church in Ontario. So I too will miss Jim in so many different ways, as a friend, as a colleague, someone I could share with very intimately. And I miss that opportunity to have someone that I can share with very intimately, in that sense of a friendship. So we come to this point now, and we do miss him, and trust that we will continue to have our ongoing association with Jeannie and Shannon and Lori and Scott and Amy in ways that will be helpful for all of us in the future. So I just simply want to say I miss him. I will continue to miss him, and yet I feel like my life has been enriched because of my association with him as a friend, as a colleague in ministry, as one who also shares a witness of Jesus Christ.
Gary and I have been asked to share a few thoughts about our friend, Jim Garwood. We've known Jim and Barb for 25 years and have become good friends as well as traveling companions. We'd like to share some of our memories with you. Jim was a member of the building committee for years. Because of his profession, he knew a lot about building and design and also had many contacts in that industry. He was passionate about choosing the best that was available within our resources for the building's upkeep, as well as the addition of the sanctuary. Jim designed and helped the children in Community Kids Club build a project that showcased the items collected during the annual food drive for the community. Cars, airplanes, trains, and other creations appeared in the foyer every fall at the back door entrance. I'm sure many of you can recall seeing them. We went on several trips with Jim and Barb. Most of the time we'd plan ahead on destinations and lodging, but sometimes it was just an adventure to go day to day. We traveled to both coasts and to Canada. While we drove from place to place, Jim often shared stories and adventures of his childhood. On what would be our final trip together last fall, he shared that he was making many of his stories into a booklet for his grandchildren. What a treasure for them. One of Jim's greatest joys was food. He would say, "This is the best, whatever he was eating at the moment, I've ever had." Or, "Oh boy, this sure is good." The next meal, the same comment. He wasn't a picky eater, and mealtime was an experience that he looked forward to with anticipation and enthusiasm. On a trip one morning, Jim woke up with a swollen lip. Barb insisted she'd had no part of it, so as we drove that day, we tried to figure out what could have caused his reaction. Finally, after much discussion, we determined it must have been a spice that he had eaten in the meatloaf the night before. Barb strongly suggested that for the rest of the trip, he should not have meatloaf, just in case the symptoms might worsen. And I can still hear Jim's reaction. "What? No more meatloaf? But I love meatloaf." I don't believe it was ever determined what caused his reaction. While we were in British Columbia last fall, we discovered that Jim and Barb had never been on a ski lift before. It was a cloudy, rainy morning, but as we rode up the mountain toward the upper lodge in an enclosed large lift car, we passed through the clouds, and it was sunny and beautiful at the top. Jim decided to browse and relax while the rest of us walked over to another more traditional lift that went on over across the valley to another peak. When we returned, Jim told us that he'd been talking to some folks, and one had recommended a good little lunch spot that we should visit, and another site that we should see while we were in the area. This was a common occurrence during our travels with Jim. He would strike up conversations with travelers and find unique places for us to visit. On another trip, this time to the Smoky Mountains, we came upon a raft rental shop. Jim and Gary decided the small river looked inviting, so they booked 2 kayaks for the next morning. Barb and I went shopping. When we returned, only Gary was at the meeting place. He reported that Jim had overturned, but that he had to go on ahead because the water was higher and faster due to a release from the upstream dam, and it wasn't possible for him to stop and help. Jim eventually showed up with quite a story. He had overturned and pinned his kayak against a large rock. And as it turned out, right across from him was a rescue team who was practicing at that very location. Needless to say, Jim had another story to add to his collection. Jim loved life. He loved to travel. He loved food, and he loved to tell stories. He loved Barb and his family. He was a son, a brother, husband, father, grandfather, and friend. But most of all, he was a servant of God and a blessing to all who knew him.
As I got to know Jim on our trips, I found out he was a very informed person. He knew a lot about many things. Of course, he was skilled and creative in architecture, but through his relationship with his customers and other people he met, he was like a sponge soaking up vast amounts of information. One example he told me about was a visit to the dentist. Jim brought up the subject about an upcoming trip he and some friends were going to take to southern Texas, and his dentist told him he had to stop at a small bakery right off an I-35 exit at the town of West Texas. The bakery was called Czech Stop, as in Czechoslovakia. Among other tasty delicacies, they made the best kolaches he had ever tasted. Of course, we had to stop, and sure enough, the place was wonderful. Jim had an endless memory bank with all kinds of unique information and fun facts, one of which centered around a trip we made to the Northwest a couple of years ago. I had never been to Vancouver, and Jim said, "Oh, we should also go up to Whistler, British Columbia." Well, I had not heard of Whistler, and Jim starts to fill me in. Among other things, he said, it was one of the 2010 Winter Olympic ski venues where they hosted many of the ski events. When we got to Whistler, we checked into our hotel, and the hotel was set up like a series of condos. We all got settled in, and the next thing I knew, someone was knocking on the adjoining door of our condo. I opened the door, and it was Jim in his bathrobe. He asked if he could use our shower because he had started to use theirs and the door came off in his hands. I said, "What?" "Yeah," he said. "He started to open the shower door and it came off its hinges right into his arms." He said he was lucky to hold on to it and keep it from falling because it was heavy. The showers were enclosed with heavy glass doors that pivoted on hinges. After Jim finished his shower, he called down to the front desk to let them know what had happened. They said they would send someone up from maintenance right away and have a look. While we were waiting for maintenance, Jim and I looked at the shower door to see how they were hinged, and both of us came to the conclusion that the design was faulty. The hinges and screws were too small for the weight of the door. When the maintenance guys arrived, they had a look, and Jim and I let them know what we thought of the whole situation, the faulty design. They listened, but were mum about our evaluation. They left, letting us know that they would get back with us shortly. Well, about an hour elapsed, and the front desk called Jim and told him they were moving all of us to one of the suites on the top floor. We got our luggage packed, and when it was time, the hotel staff moved us to the new room. Boy, was it fancy. It was like a penthouse suite. The staff was very apologetic and bent over backwards to assure we were satisfied. The four of us could not believe how nice this new condo suite was. A huge upgrade. After we got settled, continuing to talk about how lucky Jim was to not get injured and our collective good fortune from his incident, I said to Jim, "You're really a sly one to find a way to get this fancy condo." He just laughed. Sherry and I are blessed to know Jim and cherish the moments spent with him and Barb. We think of him often and miss his fellowship.
All is calm and all is bright everywhere, but in your heart tonight. They're singing carols of joy and peace, but you feel too far gone and too far out of reach. Somewhere in your silent night, heaven hears the song your broken heart has cried. Hope is here, just lift your head, for love has come to find you somewhere in your silent night. From heaven's height to manger low, there is no distance the Prince of Peace won't go. From manger low to Calvary's hill, when your pain runs deep, His love runs deeper still. He has always loved you, child, and He always will. Somewhere in your silent night, heaven hears the song your broken heart has cried. Hope is here, just lift your head, for love has come to find you somewhere in your silent night. Lift your head, lift your heart. Emmanuel will meet where you are. He knows your hurt. He knows your name. And you're the very reason that He came. Somewhere in your silent night, heaven hears the song your broken heart has cried. Hope is here, just lift your head, for love has come to find you. Somewhere in your silent night, love will find you. Ooh, love will find you. Love will find you.
From 1 John chapter 1, verse 5. This is the message we have heard from Him and proclaimed to you, that God is light, and in Him there is no darkness at all. And from Luke 11:36. If then your whole body is full of light, with no part of it in darkness, it will be as full of light as when a lamp gives you light with its rays. This light is full of love and healing power. I invite you tonight to share this light with others by engaging in a spiritual practice called holding in the light. In a moment, we will light 5 candles and pray specifically for those who are suffering loss, health concerns, inequality, unrest, and uncertainty. To share light, let us bring in the love and light of God through the top of our head and down into our heart space. We will then share the love from our heart space to others. And I invite you to bless yourself as well. Let us begin by centering ourselves with a deep cleansing breath. As we light the first candle, let us bring light into our heart space, and now share the light with all those suffering loss, that they may receive comfort and the blessings of community. For those with health concerns, we send light for healing body, mind, and spirit. We send light now to those suffering inequality, bringing justice. For our world of unrest, we send the light of peace and reconciliation. May light go forward now in these uncertain times, that all may experience calm and clarity. These things we pray, in Jesus' name, Amen.
Many faiths and cultures use symbolic stories to impart wisdom. Many of these stories have the power to heal. I would like to share 2 stories today and hope that I can weave them together in such a way that they might be meaningful. The first story is about Ashikaga Yoshimasa. He was a ruler in Japan in the late 15th century. It was said that there was an accident and his favorite tea bowl was broken. He was distraught and gathered all of the pieces together. He packaged the fragments and sent them to China to be repaired. He was horrified when upon the tea bowl's return, he discovered that it had been repaired with unsightly metal clips. It was then that he challenged the local craftsmen to come up with a solution. They carefully removed the clips and gathered the broken fragments. They put the precious tea bowl back together and filled the cracks with a special lacquer. This lacquer was dusted with an exquisite gold powder. The precious tea bowl was returned to its owner, stronger, more beautiful, and more valuable than ever. This has become a common art form, kintsugi. The wisdom of kintsugi is applicable to our lives as well. We may feel broken and cracked, vulnerable to life's changes, challenging in our brokenness. God continues to see us as whole and desires to touch those hurting places, to bless them with healing streams of grace. As a result, we too are stronger and more beautiful than before. God transforms our uncertainty into hope, despair into joy, contention into peace, and fear into love. We are healed and we are whole. I worked for many years in hospice and have accompanied hundreds of people at the end of life. It was my privilege to bear witness to profound healing as they journeyed through the dying process. Each person and family have been my teachers. Many years ago, I cared for Sylvia, a beautiful Jewish woman, the matriarch of her family. Her case was especially difficult and required intense physical care several times a day. Through it all, she was the picture of grace. I often wondered when I finished her cares how it was that I left with more energy and joy than when I had arrived. I was out of town when Sylvia died, and I was so sad that I hadn't been there for her family. I attended her memorial service, a beautiful celebration of her life, in hopes that I would find closure. During the service, the rabbi referred to Sylvia as a holy spark. He continued by sharing a story found in the Kabbalah, a sacred text of Jewish mysticism. He described a terrible accident. A great vessel filled with holy light was shattered, and countless holy sparks were scattered throughout the universe. There is a God spark in each person and in every living thing, he continued. He was cheerful as he talked about the holy spark in Sylvia. The holy light was warm and bright, he said, visible to each person that she met. He said that in addition to sharing the holy light, Sylvia had a beautiful way of recognizing, kindling, and blessing the holy spark in others. It is believed that the purpose of our life is to discover the holy light in one another, to honor and to bless it. In this way, we can heal and restore wholeness to our weary world. May God bless us on our journey.
Creator God, this evening we come together to ask for a blessing. We acknowledge that there is much suffering in the world today and that it causes us to have a sense of separateness. and a sense of being cut off in our own inner reality as well as from the external world. This feeling comes from the assumption that what happens to the other and to the natural world does not affect us, but this separateness is an illusion. The actual reality is that there is an interconnectedness and an interdependence between us and this world. When we embrace this reality, we begin to treat others and the natural world as not just being separate from ourselves, but with the understanding that each of us is a part of the whole. That is when we realize that this is a blessing from you. We create a sacred place in our lives for you and for those with whom we share this life. To truly understand your intention for us, we need to go to those sacred places and draw strength from them. That strength comes from the inner voice that says you will always be with us, and the strength that comes from the love of others. This blessing helps us through the difficult times. This last while has caused unexpected trials and brought grief in many ways. We grieve the relationships that are strained or lost. We grieve the change in our daily routines and what we consider normal. We grieve the sense of safety and security that we have lost. But God, we also recognize that in spite of that, you have blessed us with a hope that comes from you. But even in our lowest times, you give us the understanding that you are there and that we will see brighter days ahead. And so tonight we come with thankfulness in our hearts. We come with appreciation for our relationships. We come with the understanding that all we need to do is ask for the blessing of your presence, and you will be there. And so tonight, that is our prayer. Amen.
The season of Advent means something is on the horizon, the likes of which we've never seen before. It is not possible to keep it from coming because it will. That's how Advent works. But what is possible is not to see it, to turn just as it's brushing past you. And then you begin to grasp what it was that you missed. Like Moses in the cleft of the rock, watching God's hindquarters fade into the distance. So, stay, sit, linger, tarry, ponder, wait, behold, wonder. There will be time enough for running, for rushing, for worrying, for pushing. For now, stay, wait. Something is on the horizon.
It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again.
Dang, who knew? All the planes we flew, good things we've been through. I'll be standing right here talking to you about another path. I know we love to hit the road and laugh, but something told me that it wouldn't last. Had to switch up, look at things different, see the bigger picture. Those were the days, hard work forever pays.
Now I see you in a better place.
See you in a better place.
How can we not talk about family when family's all that we got? Everything I went through, you were standing there by my side, and now you're gonna be with me for the last ride. It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again. First you both go watch your way, and the vibe is feeling stronger. What's small turn to a friendship, and friendship turn to a bond, and the bond will never be broken, and love will never get lost. And when brotherhood comes, then the line will never be crossed. Established it on our own when that line had to be drawn, and that line is what we reach. So remember me when I'm gone, and I'm gone. How can we not talk about family when family's all that we got? Everything I went through, you were standing there by my side, and now you're gonna be with me for the last time. So let the light guide your way. Yeah. Hold every memory as you go, and every road you take will always lead you home. It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long